So there's 4 principles that really make up design thinking, and it's interesting because these bring out the customer in a way that's really hard to do with other types of tools, and the combination of them are really powerful. So the 4 tools, the 4 principles that we use are empathy, co-creation, iteration, and visualization. And I'll tell you a little bit about each and then tell a story that kind of ties them up together. So empathy is really saying, don't just listen to your customer, but really kind of try and peel back the layers of the needs that they're not telling you about. So listening is one thing, but being able to ask really open-ended questions and really listening for the answers that they want to give you rather than what you want to hear, so to speak. The second thing is iteration, and this is really saying, it's tempting when you come out of a brainstorming session to say, I have 2 or 3 great ideas, people really like this, and now we're going to execute on this. Or maybe you want to do maybe you do a pilot, but the pilot in our world turns into a 2-year thing and really just a launch. The temptation is to go into execution mode at that point. And what we would say is really encourage iteration. And this can be cycles that are 30 days, 60 days, but we want them short and sweet. And what that really means is you make a rough prototype, something just sketched out on paper in 2D, show it to a customer, come back, change it, go through this cycle again. And you also, not just talk to your customer, really see if it works internally, so you'll kind of test the business model out too. The third thing is visualization, and that's, our world is getting more visual, but we still, sometimes when we're communicating without a lot of visualization to help us tell our story, the story isn't told as well, the message is not heard in the way that we might have intended it to. So we just had a meeting with a potential client where we talked for a couple of minutes and met up face-to-face but didn't use any visuals, went back, wrote something up. It was completely different than what we had talked about, and then we came back together with a whiteboard, and through sketching out our idea, we were able to get to a common place in 5 minutes. And the last one is co-creation, and this is it's sort of like collaboration, but it's really giving the power back to your customer and putting it back in their hands. And so again, this is kind of with iteration. You go out with a prototype. And instead of this prototype being a really buttoned up 50-page PowerPoint of your new idea, it's a sketch, it's a drawing, and the rougher that it is, the better. And you want to hand it to your customer and say, tell me what you think about it. Ask as little questions as possible and get them to say, what are you seeing in this? Where do you play in this? What's happening? Hand them a pen and say, what would you do differently? What would you add to this? And that's really empowering. You're going to get a lot more information from your customer in that way than bringing something that looks very done. There's a social cue to say this person looks like they really prepared and spent a long time on this, so it must be right. So those 4 principles really come to bear in a particular project that we did with Pfizer in 2006. Pfizer at that point in time had Nicorette was under their purview. It's now been sold to Johnson & Johnson, but at the time they owned it and they was losing money. They were trying to decide, should we divest this or should we regroup and try it one more time? And they said, let's try it one more time. We're going to use some of the principles in design thinking. We're going to really go out and understand our customers' needs first. And what they found was through using more empathetic, more ethnographic based research, they really try to understand their customer better in terms of where they were. So here's Pfizer. They're scientists. They know exactly how to manipulate molecules, and they knew that the molecules in Nicorette scientifically curbed addiction. So why weren't people buying this? This actually scientifically worked. And what they found when they started talking to customers is customers did not see this as a medical concern. They did not see themselves as medically addicted to anything. So why would they choose a product that's what it claims to offer? What they really saw is smoking was a lifestyle choice for them, and so they needed a product that was going to cater to that. And they, at any point in time, they could change their mind, but it was more social, and they needed more of a network. And so that really using that empathetic techniques and ethnographic-based research helped them get to that. The iteration piece came in, and they did some brainstorming off of what they heard from the customer, and they had 2 or 3 concepts, and they decided instead of just picking one and running with it, they're going to go through some iterations of it and co-create with their customers. So they made light prototypes, and they gave themselves 6 months to test all 3. And they went back out and said, they stood up just enough to make the service feel real, but they weren't spending a ton of money executing it, so to speak. And they went back out and said, how does this feel? And that helped them, fine-tune things and ultimately pick one of the 3 concepts. It actually became a mashup of 2 to say, this is what we really want to move forward with in the market. And the visualization piece came in that they showed a lot of storyboards to people at first of like, hey, and this was stories about them quitting smoking, and someone could say, could pick up a pen and say, actually, that's not this doesn't resonate with me, and here's why. This is what my story would look like. Let me draw it for you. Or this place is blank. Let me show it for you. And so it was great. They really were able to reframe it, and now Nicorette is sold as Active Stop, which has a whole coaching support system around it, and you get your friends and they're texting. And then the revenue model is very different. It was actually all online sales, which Pfizer had never done, and Pfizer had also never made a service around their product. So this, starting with really understanding the needs of the customer, really helped them launch into this brand new world confidently.
Yeah.